Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is Tom Toolan, who's probably got the saddest story I've had on the podcast. It's a modern problem, but we're going to get into that now. So, first of all, welcome, Tom, to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Could you Let's get right into your story now. So what is your story? Why are you on this podcast today?
Okay, so I want to raise awareness of parental alienation using child abduction. So in 2018, my daughter was unlawfully abducted and taken to Poland. She was abducted against the UK court order, which stipulated that she couldn't be permanently removed from the UK. And Rihanna was abducted 3 months after that court ruling, with, it appears, the help of her nursery, which is clearly something I raised with the police at the time. Rihanna remains in Poland, despite me winning every court case in the UK and in Poland.
First question, when you say abducted, are you talking about her biological mother?
So yes, she was abducted by her biological mother. And this is, it's an interesting point, really. So the law is challenging in this area because there are two types of abduction. There is parental abduction, where a parent pretends to go on holiday and doesn't return to the UK. And then there's a criminal abduction under the 1984 Child Abduction Act, which is just a plain old child abduction, kidnapping type case, and is a criminal offence. Now, when my daughter was abducted, I reported Rihanna as missing to Essex Police. Essex Police didn't want to play ball because they said it was a civil matter. And it took me 4 years and the help and support of a different police force, Suffolk Police, and the CPS before I got a criminal charges laid against my daughter's abductor. And at the moment, there's an international arrest warrant and extradition warrants outstanding for my daughter's abductor.
Right, so it's gone that far now. I think one of your biggest problems is the fact you're a man and only a father. If you'd have been a woman and reported this, that the father had abducted their child, I think you probably would have got a lot more help and support. I'm not saying they could have done anything different, but you would have got a lot more help and support, especially from the police.
I think there's a number of issues there. The first thing is, if a man, a dad, takes his child, then automatically it's assumed the worst, and there is literally a manhunt, and 9 out of 10 times the child will be found and returned very, very quickly. If a father reports a child abduction, then it's a totally different ball game. And at the time I reported my daughter as missing, all I got from Essex Police particularly was, it's not really our problem. We don't really want to know. It's all too difficult. And what is really difficult for me at the time is we were still a member of the European Union, which meant that if Essex Police had acted appropriately and quickly, an international arrest warrant could have been issued and circulated in Poland under EU rules, and my daughter probably would have been back in the UK almost immediately, rather than me having to go through the civil aspects of international child abduction, the Hague Convention, appeals, Supreme Court, and winning everything, but my daughter stay in Poland.
Let's go back a few years then. So I'm presuming you'd met Rihanna's mum, you fell in love, did you get married, was you living together? Was the relationship always strained from the beginning? And why did you end up splitting up, or why did she go back to Poland? Those sort of questions.
Okay, so I was studying for a master's degree in London. I lived in Suffolk, and we were introduced by a mutual friend. It wasn't a good match, I suppose, because of the cultural differences, but we got along okay together. And we got to a point where she actually asked if she could come and stay with me in Suffolk because she sort of had enough of London. The pregnancy was not a planned pregnancy, and she was devastated when she did get pregnant because I'd helped her set up a business in Suffolk, and it was doing quite well, and she found it difficult knowing that she was pregnant, and that put a tremendous amount of strain on the relationship. In the lead up to giving birth, she made it clear that she wouldn't be looking after my daughter when she was born. And to be fair, true to her word, within 6 weeks, she told me she was going back to work and I would have to look after Rihanna, and which is what I did. So from 6 weeks to 3.5 years old, I was a full-time dad with Rihanna. I also ran a consultancy business at the time as well. And then I went back into full-time work and Rihanna went into nursery. The relationship declined, and there are lots of reasons for that. Work and not having a work-life balance and different priorities.
Sometimes, isn't it? It's just life.
It is, yeah. And the relationship ended. It was my fault if blame was going to be apportioned. I hold my hand up to that. But what happened after that were choices that people made, and almost immediately, I lost nearly all contact with my daughter. I had to start negotiating with that, and the price was money. The return of items of my belongings and things like that. I eventually went to court to try and formalize my contact and to ask the court for 50-50 parenting. The court gave me every other weekend, which is what they do. They said no to 50-50 parenting on the basis that they didn't believe my personal life was stable enough to tolerate it. And then a couple of months later, my ex-partner applied for leave to go to Poland. When she applied to leave to go to Poland, she made 2 applications in essence. One was to reduce my contact with my daughter on the basis that I was an abuser, both of her and my daughter, and also leave to remove to go to Poland. When we got to court, the judge sat there and said to her, "What is it do you want? Are you seeking to restrict your daughter's contact with their dad? And are the allegations of abuse the reason why? Or do you want to go to Poland?" So she withdrew the allegations of abuse and said, "I want to go to Poland." However, when the judge, because then what the judge did, he set aside and asked for CAFCAS to be involved, the Court of the Children's Advisory Services, because clearly there was allegations had been made. And all those allegations were investigated, and all those allegations were found to be untrue, with no substance, no evidence.
It's so easy for women in this position to throw those allegations at the very beginning because it never hurts their case and it always puts the male on the back foot, and we all think no smoke without fire. And I think when people do that and there is no proof, I think there has to be some sort of consequence to the person who throws those allegations initially. There has to be. It's like the word racist or homophobe, and male toxicity. We throw those things around now, and not only is it dangerous, it's really, really unfair. It's a type of abuse itself.
It is, because it's a really easy word to say, but what people don't realize is the devastating consequences as a result of the use of that word. So I now found myself in a position of having to defend my position. And what's ironic is initially I thought I had no evidence to prove my innocence as such, but clearly I did. It was how I found that evidence. So I'll give you a good example. So I worked in the sector of business where I required a DBS, a borrowing and disclosure service certificate, which basically says,
Please check on your criminal record. Yeah.
that's right. Well, I had one of them going back for 20 years. So I could prove that I had no criminal convictions for anything at all. But that doesn't stop you being an abuser, does it? It just means you've not been caught. I then had to get statements from various people and so on and so forth. But the most important thing is she could not produce any evidence. So there was no intervention by the police. There were no photographs of any injuries, no visits to the doctor, and so on and so forth. So it was clearly fabrication. And that came out in court. It also came out in the Kafkas interview, because she confessed to the Kafkas officer basically that the only reason she wanted to go to Poland was to get Rihanna away from me. So it was clear she wanted to punish me, and that's what it was all about. It wasn't about it was about the relationship breakdown, yeah, but it was about punishing me. And she used whatever was in her armory to do so. And the people who advise parents, and unfortunately it is women, it's almost like a standard operating procedure. The first thing you do is you get a non-molestation order. The second thing you do is you make false allegations. Don't worry about whether you can prove it or not, because no one will bring you to task. So just do it. And that's what happened. It happened in the UK, and it happened again in Poland when I went to court in Poland.
Right, we'll get into Poland in a minute. I think a question I want to ask is probably the most important question. What is Rihanna like?
Wow. So Rihanna was a beautiful, happy, smiley, very, very intelligent child. She had blonde, curly locks of hair. She was just lovely. And we were so close. She was just everything to me. She was, she was, and now when I look at the videos I have of Rihanna or the photographs, actually I did go through a period where I couldn't look at a photograph of Rihanna or a video because it would just make me cry. And it's only been in the last year that I've managed to put her photographs back up on the wall and stuff like that where I could look at them. But it is painful. But Rihanna's a wonderful little child. She was innocent, untarnished. She had the love of both parents, and she had nothing to worry about whatsoever. And she was dragged into a world that, for a child, is horrendous and will have lifetime implications for her when she grows up.
Absolutely. I mean, children need both parents. That's why we have a mother and a father. And, our prisons are full of people who didn't have fathers at home. I'm not for one moment suggesting Ian's going to end up in jail, but I'm just saying that's how important fathers are to boys and girls. We forget about that. And you've probably thought about this yourself. She's being told stuff about you now. She's probably being told, we live here because your daddy doesn't want you, and you don't speak to your daddy because he doesn't want to speak to you. And the poison that's probably been dripped into her mind over the last so many years is an offence itself.
It's child abuse. I mean, we need to stop messing around with the words. It's child abuse. Rihanna's abduction was child abuse. Her continued living in Poland illegally is child abuse. But if everyone can sort of walk in Rihanna's shoes just for 1 minute, what happens when Rihanna wakes up one morning, sees something on the internet, which ultimately she will do eventually, and realize that everyone around her has lied to her for whatever period of time it is. So all those people that had told her that her dad didn't want her dad was evil, he was a nasty, horrible person, yet the internet will tell Rihanna that her dad has done nothing but fight to be in her life for the last 5 years, and gone on to fight with other dads, because I am one of 7 dads at the moment whose children are illegally detained in Poland. But these children go on to suffer enormous mental distress in later life. And you're right, prisons are full of young people who've not had a father in their life, who've not had a father figure as a role model, male and female. And the statistics say it all. Single parent families are not good for society.
Mm, mm. My next question is, you mentioned then a little while ago going to fight the courts in Poland. So fighting the courts in England would be, I'm not saying it was easy in England, but at least you don't, you can understand that. But you've taken it one step further. You've involved the Polish courts. How did that go? How did they treat you? Are they part of the problem? Talk about the Polish side of it.
Okay, so there's a process called the Hague Convention, and it's called the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction under the 1980 Hague Convention. So you make an application, the courts are supposed to process the application within a certain period of time. I was awarded legal aid, but when I spoke to my legal aid Polish solicitor, she didn't have a clue what she was doing. So I had to then pay for my own representation. And we had a very short period of time to prepare my case. And I've got to say, the Court of First Instance, which was the Łódź District Court in Poland, were brilliant. They listened to my case, they assessed the evidence or the lack of evidence, and they made the right decision, and they ruled in my favor. What the issue is with Poland is enforcement, and now the interference of the Polish government in judicial proceedings to prevent the return of UK children abducted to Poland. But my court went to the Court of First Instance. It then went to the Warsaw Appeal Court, and she lost her appeal. With the Polish Children's Ombudsman, she then took the case to the Supreme Court of Poland. She lost that case as well. And in each case, the courts made some really profound commentary. First of all, Rihanna's abduction was unlawful. Secondly, it was in Rihanna's best interest to return to the UK, and this is important, with or without her mother. So they'd recognise how damaging it was for Rihanna to remain in Poland. And thirdly, there were no barriers to Rihanna returning to the UK or her mother to returning to the UK. And that's important because the no barrier bit is really talking about the risk of abuse. So there was, and in my case, they said in all my cases, there is no evidence of abuse against Rihanna or against her mother. And that was a relief for me, because now at this point, I'm coming up to something like 10 courts between the UK and Poland, all saying the same thing. Rihanna needs to come back to the UK and there's no risk.
So if the Polish courts are not the problem, what's the problem in Poland?
Right. So once the Polish courts have ordered the return of your child, it goes to what's called a curator, in essence, a bailiff. And these bailiffs live in the communities that they enforce in. So basically, they're being asked to remove children from the families they live next door to return them to a non-UK, to a non-Polish national. In my case was a little bit more complicated because my daughter lived with her auntie and her mom and her grandparents, and the auntie is a Polish police officer. I made several complaints to the Polish authorities about honesty and integrity and a moral and ethical duty to as a police officer, but that was all ignored. I even tried to take prosecutions or get the Polish to prosecute for perverting the course of justice by the mother and the auntie, and then just not interested. But people have got to understand this. The Polish government, while holding their hand out for money from the UK government, are abducting our children and is state-sponsored child abduction. And the Polish justice minister intervened in one of the father's cases to prevent 2 British children returning to the UK, and then went on Twitter and boasted about it. That's how bad, that's Poland. But at the same time, the president of Poland is going to attend the king's coronation. MBDMA, the missile organization, just signed an enormous deal with Poland. The UK taxpayer is funding this, and that really sticks in my throat.
No, absolutely. I don't want you to answer this question, so this is more a statement, so don't even feel tempted to answer it, because you may put yourself into trouble later. But my initial feeling for me would be, I'd go steal her back. Now, don't answer that, but that would be an initial feeling I would have if something happened to my granddaughter. But again, that's an initial feeling. Does that will that work? Will that make things worse? That's a discussion for another day. Now, I've got a family member who is in a little bit of the same situation as you, nowhere near as drastic as you. He gets to see his child once a year, and gets a phone call once a month, which I'm sure you'd be ecstatic with at this moment in time if you had that. You'd still be fighting, but at least you'd have something. And that happened to him with an Eastern European, and then he didn't really learn his lesson, because then he made the same mistake with another Eastern European girl. So he's got 2 problems now of the same, all from the same mistake. So I think the question I wanted to ask was, it's easy with hindsight, and is there a problem where we need to educate men and women, because this happens a lot to women, especially white women who end up marrying Indian or Pakistani men, who then take their children away to the subcontinent. So it happens on both sexes, and it's not just an Eastern European problem, it's a national problem. And the problem is, because we have lots of foreign people living in the UK and we're having relationships with them, men and women should be a little bit more knowledgeable of what can go wrong with that relationship, and they can potentially lose their children over something like that. Do you think we need to start educating British people on some of the downsides of not into racist relationships, because they're not always different races, but marrying or basically having children with foreigners who can flee this country?
So culturally, England is culturally open. It has a diverse population, very diverse, more diverse than a lot of other countries. And with that diversity comes risk. And whether you're a male or a female, you're open to that risk. It is more, on balance, it seems more like men are targeted. And I use that word carefully because sometimes it is an approach that non-UK nationals take. Men do need to be educated. So do girls, women. They need to understand that it's a risk. They need to understand what can and can't happen when that risk materializes. But more importantly, they need to know what support is available to them. And the thing is, and this is a really, it's a reality, there is no support. So when it happens to you, you're going to look behind you, and the only one going to be standing by you is your closest friend and family. And what you're going to find after time is they will go as well, and you'll be on your own. And you'll be left on your own to deal with your own mental health, the financial consequences of what's gone on. And if you're lucky, you'll still have a job because you managed to do both, but quite often you won't be able to do that. So we do need to be educated, but we need to be educated in the broadest sense, because parental alienation using child abduction is an extreme form of parental alienation. Parental alienation per se is prevalent in the UK at epidemic levels. And we need to educate our courts, the police, social services, CAFCAS, and even organisations like the NSPCC, who do not recognise parental alienation. And that is awful. Because ultimately, the people who suffer the most are the children.
The children are absolutely, the children are the one who are missing out on 50% of parenting.
Yeah, and it's the children who are being abused, because there seems to be this, I don't know, I can't remember what the word is for it now. It has to be talked about. This is a form of child abuse. Parental child abduction is a form of child abuse, but it's also a form of domestic abuse, because the left behind parent, you're suffering a bereavement for a living child, and hope becomes a chain around your neck, because you embark on a roller coaster of hope, knowing in the depths of your heart that it's not going to happen. But going back to the question, education is always the key, but educating the right people at the right time is what it's about. And at the moment, the Ministry of Justice, the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, they're scared to deal with Poland, because from a country point of view, we do business with Poland. So they won't deal with the issue.
And that's the issue with many countries. That's why we have a good relationship with Saudi Arabia, even though it's a horrendous backward civilization, because we make money there and we buy oil there. So sometimes, the political will's not there because of the international benefits of dealing with those countries. And people will just say Rihanna is a victim of collateral damage on the world stage, which she shouldn't be. If there's a man watching this now who's in this situation, or may be in this situation in the future, what's one piece of advice you would give that man?
Well, looking at the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. Don't panic. You will survive, as painful as it will be. And you just need to take a step back and take each day as it comes. There is some support out there, and there are people out there who can help you. And one of the things that you really need to do is engage with your MP as soon as possible once your child has been abducted, whether you're a mother or a father, because they can bring other MPs together to start tackling this issue at a national level, and they may be able to point you in the right direction as well.
No, good. Thank you for that bit of information and that little bit of advice. Finally, when you are successful, will you come back on and tell us the happy ending and how Rihanna is?
I would love to. And I've got to put an R but on that, is I don't believe I'm going to get my daughter back. I am nearly 60 years old. Rihanna's 9. I'm going to be lucky to see Rihanna again. And that breaks my heart. But of course, if Rihanna gets in touch with me in the meantime, of course I will come back and tell you.
That's a sad way to end the podcast, but people need to know about this. Parent alienation is horrendous. You're right, it is child abuse, and we should stop, regardless of the father, mother. We shouldn't be doing this, because the person it damages the most is the child, and it's child abuse. And we need, as a society, to come together, and we need to support families. Even when they break down, we still need to support families, and we need to support children. Tom, thank you very much for coming on, and I'll keep in contact, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.